We're going to be heading back to Daniel chapter 1 just for a little bit. I had told you guys back in the beginning that the very first part of Daniel chapter 1 is where you end up seeing a hint at what's going to happen throughout Daniel. In fact, if you everybody can open up to the book of Daniel if you have your Bible, and we'll read through that first verse. It says, in the year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels of the treasury of his God into the treasury of his God. There's a lot that happens right there. So we have Daniel and the stuff that's in the house of God all being taken to Babylon. It says to the house of Shinar. So or to the land of Shinar. That's where Babylon is. And so does anyone remember the name of the god that is the god of Babylon? No. Starts with an M. Marduk. Did someone say it? Yeah. So Marduk, temple god of Babylon. He's the top guy as far as the gods go in Babylon. There are other gods that are subservient to him. Tiamat is one of them. We're not going to get into all of the other gods. We might come back to that a little bit later. But understand that all of the items that were brought out of Jerusalem were brought into the temple of Marduk. And so when we see in chapter 2, or what we're going to see in chapter 2, is really the beginning of the undoing of Babylon. And we're going to look at that in a number of different ways today. But the first way that I want to look at that, because what's happening interestingly in chapter 2 is we're actually changing languages. How many of you guys know the two languages that the book of Daniel is written in? Anyone? One of them is the common tongue in the Old Testament. Hebrew, yeah. What did you say? Aramaic. Yep. In the middle of a verse, this is so weird, guys. In the middle of verse 4, the language goes from being spoken Hebrew to Aramaic. Now, what language did the Israeli people speak? Did the Jewish people speak? Hebrew. What did they speak? Any? I mean, is there any record of them speaking Aramaic in the Old Testament? No. So this is, what do we have? Why would the author? We're assuming it's Daniel. I'm gonna try and drive home a really solid argument for why it's Daniel here in a sec. But why would Daniel switch the language? So who?
Other people.
Yeah. Where is he? He's in Babylon. Why would you want people in Babylon to hear a part of this story?
Kind of like a testimony.
Yeah. In chapter 4, chapter 4 is probably my favorite. It might be my favorite section of the Bible for a number of different reasons. John 15 is pretty amazing. I could just live in John 15 for most of my life. But Daniel chapter 4 is pretty crazy because we get to see the testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar. Here we're going to start seeing the change in Nebuchadnezzar's heart. Nebuchadnezzar, again, is this a soft-spoken, kind guy to his enemies? No, he's very harsh. He's very strong. He presents strong, but Babylon's how does Babylon take over other cultures? What's their tactic that we've talked about? Yes, say it louder. Assimilation. So instead of that's awesome. Well done. Give her a round of applause. Yeah, that's a good word. So instead of trying to force people, what they try and do is get them to change. Now this is going to come back because again, when they brought the temple items, Babylon, the Jews or the people in Jerusalem were not the first people that Babylon had taken captive. There were other temple idols from other cultures that were being stored in the house of Marduk. So when the Jewish items end up in that temple, it's almost like a museum. When you go to a museum, do you just see the remnants of one thing? Like if you go to a World History Museum, no, it's everything from everywhere. If you go to the British Museum or St. Petersburg Museum, what's the one in Chicago? There's the Smithsonian in DC, but there's a great one in Chicago that I've been to. It tells stories of everywhere. And the reason why they're bringing all of these temple objects to this temple, it's not because they think that they're great. It's symbolically saying, look, you're in us now. You are under us. Your parents might say, like, when you are under our roof, you're going to do what we say. It's that kind of relationship between the God of Israel and the gods of Babylon. And so when we see this language though change in verse 4, it's almost like they've brought in something that is going to use their own language, their own culture, to collapse what they had. I'm gonna read this for you. And you're going to understand a little bit about the language part. And I'm going to apologize right off the bat for this to those of you who are offended easily or you don't like any kind of silliness. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians and the enchanters, the sorcerers and the Chaldeans be summoned to the king to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to him, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic. So we switch languages right there. It doesn't switch in your Bible. It's just being translated from Hebrew to English versus Aramaic to English. King Nebuchadnezzar, you're him for real. Just tell us the dream and we'll decode it. Bet. Nebuchadnezzar says, y'all think this is a game? Nah. I'm telling you the dream. You tell me what I dreamed and what it means, or you're all cooked. Like fully cooked. Your house is gone dust. But if you nail it, I'll bless you so hard you be busting. Cash, honor, influence, the whole vibe. The Chaldeans blink. Babe, can you maybe just tell us what the dream was first? Neb leans forward. You be mad sus. You're stalling. You think I won't notice? Nah, I can feel your aura. It's beige. It's giving fake friend energy. Tell me the dream or it's curtains. The wise men huddle, whispering, bro, this man's unhinged. No one on earth can do what he's asking. Not even the gods hang with us like that. Nebuchadnezzar hears it and loses it. His anger ate and left no crumbs. He shouts, kill them all. Every last wise guy in Babylon, you're done. Guards start rounding everybody up. Dream interpreters, scholars, magicians. Everyone's cooked. Daniel and his crew land on the list too. But Daniel stays low-key calm. And he walks up to Arioch, the head executioner. Hey, bro, what's the vibe? Why the king be acting sus? Arioch sighs. Neb had a nightmare meltdown and decided to delete all of us. Daniel nods. Bet. Take me to him. I got this. He heads home, rallies his crew, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. I realize this is very cringe, and I apologize, but I'm going to make a point here in a sec. All right, fam, we're praying tonight. Ask God to show mercy and drop the dream download before we get cooked. That night, God actually delivers. Daniel wakes up like, yo, God's timing, perfect. His power unreal, his wisdom is bussin'. He changes kings like playlist tracks. He reveals deep secrets like no one else can see. He's him. Next day, Daniel runs to Arioch. Yo, cancel the execution order. I got the deets. Arioch grins, say less. He drags Daniel before Nebuchadnezzar. This guy right here, this exile, he's built different. He can tell you the dream. Nebuchadnezzar squints. So you really think you know what these wise guys couldn't? Bold. Daniel, TBH, no human can. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he's the one showing you what's about to go down. It's not me flexing, it's God putting you on notice. He continues, here's what you saw, king. You dreamed of a massive statue, so shiny it low-key scared you, head of gold, chest of arms, silver, belly and thighs bronze, legs iron, feet part iron, part clay. Then out of nowhere, this rock, cut without human hands, flies and smashes the statue's feet. Everything breaks. Iron, clay, bronze, silver, gold, it becomes dust. The rock grows into a whole mountain filling the world. That's the dream. Nebuchadnezzar's jaw drops. Daniel grins. Here's the tea. You're the gold head. You're that guy. God made your kingdom amazing. But after you comes another, less shiny. Then a third that rules everything. Then a fourth built like iron, breaking everything. But those feet, iron and clay vibes. Half strong, half weak. It'll try to hold together, but it's messy, fragile, not built to last. And that rock, that's God's kingdom, uncut, pure power. It's coming in hot, smashing all wannabe empires, and it's never leaving. He dusts off his robe. So yeah, that's the dream. That's the meaning. God flexed, really ate. Neb drops to the floor, crown cooked, ego demolished. This dude's God is it. This God's God, Lord of Kings, revealer of secrets. Give this man everything, gifts, power, respect. Then Nebuchadnezzar promotes Daniel to boss level, puts him over Babylon, makes him chief of the wise men. Daniel's like, my squad rolls with me. So Nebuchadnezzar sets up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as city admins, while Daniel chills in the palace, living that blessed, bussin' life under the divine management. I really apologize for that, but I want to ask you a question. In 300 years, would there be any way that you could mistake that retelling of Daniel chapter 2 was from 2025? No. You would, because I guarantee a year from all of those, half of that stuff is like out of touch already. Like your guys' slang words like come in and go out super quick. My guess is that a lot of that is from like 2020 to 2023. You could probably guess that maybe it came from an adult trying to be funny in 2025. And probably pinpoint it, if you're a historian linguist, between 2015 and say 2035, 300 years from now. Why does this matter? When we're looking at the language, first off, what is chapter 2 about to do? What was the story that Daniel just told in chapter 2? Yeah.
It's kind of setting up the rest of history from that point onward, kind of displaying to Nebuchadnezzar like how like Babylon is eventually just going to is on like a slow decline, and like if they peaked where he's at right now.
Yes, and what he gives him is 4 different empires. This is really important because honestly, like if you walk away from this only remembering, you can forget all of the Gen Z lingo rendition of the Bible. What I'd love for you to take away from this is when you see this language being used here, it's very particular to 5th and 6th century Babylon. It's imperial language that ends up getting gotten rid of. It's no longer used. It becomes a dead language after 4th century BCE. This is important. What's up, dude?
I'm so sorry, I was late.
No, you're good. So what ends up happening? We're in Daniel chapter 2. What ends up happening, and it's probably good, Nathan, that you missed. Sorry to call you out. It's probably good that you missed. You probably would have given me a ton of eye rolls for what I just did. So I'm kind of glad that I'm not embarrassing myself in front of everyone tonight. But when that language gets used, it dates when this is written. A lot of what is being talked about in Daniel chapter 2 comes to place really quickly. So we see these 4 different empires that are discussed. The head of gold, which is Babylon. Does anyone know what the empire is that's the chest and arms? Yes. There's one other arm that's in there though. The Medes. So you have the Medo-Persian Empire that comes in. 2 arms, strong like silver. The chest or the belly is the Greeks. Yep, Alexander the Great. And in chapter 8, it gets prophesied again that empire will fall essentially because it doesn't have an heir. It's strong, but it has nowhere to go. And the legs, Roman Empire, also divided into 2, east and west. All of this comes into place within the next 500 years, 600 years. I guess the split of Rome happens longer after this. But all of these empires come into place and then disappear in almost the exact way that Daniel prophesies. The reason why this is interesting and important is the language here is important is because a lot of the people who try and say that the book of Daniel is not true, they try and date it to about 200 BC. So if you're trying to disprove, why would it matter that it was written in 200 BC versus 500 or 600 BC? Yeah, he's talking about something that already happened. It essentially becomes like me writing about yesterday as if it hasn't happened yet. I predict that I am going to wake up and take my daughter to coffee. Tomorrow, I predicted the future. That doesn't make any sense if you're actually looking to the document to try and prove something. But if it's written in 5th and 6th century, then what it does is it shows us that the God of the Old Testament is not only real, but speaks to us and interjects himself into history. We see this happening in, I would say, the strongest form of evidence that we have. That the language part locks that in. And so from chapter 2, verse 4, I realize we're getting a little bit deep. I promise we'll pull it back. But this is really, really crucial to understanding why this story is not just a fairy tale or a moralistic telling. It's history and it's prophecy. And so when we see the language, and historians look back, not necessarily Christian historians, most historians are not Christian, they look at this and it becomes incredibly troublesome for them to deal with the fact that this is written with imperial language, imperial Aramaic, 300 years before all of these things start to prove to be true. Let me unlock this. I've got a quick question about, a couple questions about language. We're not going to take too much time on this because I want to make sure that I can wrap this up. But how many of you guys speak more than one language? With your neighbor, tell your neighbor how many languages you speak or what languages you speak. All right, who speaks more than 3 languages? Who speaks more than 3 languages? Who speaks more than 4 languages? Anybody? Or what languages do you guys speak?
Japanese, Mandarin, English, and Spanish.
Let's go. Nice.
Spanish, Russian, Hindi, and
Russian.
yeah.
Can you read it? You want to sit down and read some Dostoevsky for me sometime? And translate. That would be amazing. Those of you who are bilingual or multilingual, do you ever get in conversations with people who speak more than one language as well, and you start going back and forth in more than one language? Singlish is one of the ones that I hear often. Any other common combos at home or with friends? Yeah.
There's not really an expert like Indonesian and English.
Okay. Do you go back and forth?
Yeah, it's usually like we speak in English, but then sometimes Indonesian just has better words or something.
Yes.
Like it makes more sense to put that word there.
So my favorite word, possibly in all languages that I've learned, is mafan. I learned it almost as soon as we landed in China when we moved there. Someone give me a rough translation of mafan? There is no real good English word for it if you speak Chinese. It's like trouble or problems, but what it really means, you can't really know unless you lived in mafan. I don't know how else to describe it. Dealing with a bank in China is mafan. Learning how to figure out how to get a visa in Malaysia is mafan. Do you ever use more than one with the same people? Yeah. Usually it's I've heard Korean and English spoken back and forth, or Chinese and English. And if a teacher is around, because I used to be a teacher, and the parent and the student were having a conversation, the student would try and switch the language into whatever the other non-English language was so that the teacher couldn't hear what they were arguing about. Those are my favorite. Sorry, we're going to bring this back, I promise. When the whole point of the language thing is when you're somewhere else, culture becomes a part of language, and language becomes a part of culture. The two are intertwined. What Daniel's doing here by emphasizing the Aramaic for these next 5 chapters is he's trying to be evangelical to Babylon. He's taking culture and trying to use the culture of Babylon to relay something really deep to these people. And it's going to be, in my opinion, what ends up breaking Babylon. We're seeing the fracture of that right here, because at the end of the chapter, what does Nebuchadnezzar do? says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, this is verse 46, and did homage to Daniel and gave orders to present him an offering and fragrant incense. The king answered Daniel and said, Surely your God is a God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, since you have been able to reveal this mystery. What was demoted becomes elevated. God comes in lower. The symbols that represented him that were taken out of Jerusalem were put underneath the house of Marduk. These symbols now become what usurps Marduk. Why? When the Chaldeans and the magicians and the sorcerers all get brought before the king, and the king's like, you need to tell me the dream, and you need to tell me what it means. What did they say back to the king? Nah, bro. No one can do that. What are you talking about? You're crazy. This isn't something that anyone's ever asked for, and no one can do what you're asking for. So why don't you not kill us? And Daniel's like, or not Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar's like, forget you. You're all dead. Kill them all. And what happens, again, this is kind of, I feel like I'm going forward through this and then having to rewind and show these pieces as in different perspectives. But by the end of it, hopefully you can see the whole thing. When Nebuchadnezzar asks the magicians, who's not there? He says, bring the wise men. Who's not in that meeting? Daniel. Daniel's not in that meeting. It kind of seems like it's 2 or 3 days after the fact that Daniel gets the memo, oh, by the way, you're going to die. Like someone knocks on the door and is like, hey, because of these other guys, they couldn't do what they needed to do, you're done. And why might Daniel not be there? He was a wise man.
He was a foreigner.
Yeah. He's an outsider. I was talking to Mrs. Knudsen about this last night. In news media, there's something called golden handcuffs. They do this to athletes too. Has anyone ever heard that phrase before, golden handcuffs? You're going to learn something that has nothing to do with the Bible right now. When let's say that you're working for a news network, we'll call it MSNBC, and they don't really want you to keep going. They want you to stop, but they really don't want you to go work for Fox News. And so what they do, they have a contract for you that is maybe 10 or 15 years. What they say is, we're going to keep paying you for your contract, but because we're paying you for your contract, you have to stay with us, but we're not going to put you on the air. So you're going to get paid out for your contract, what we owe you over the life of that, but you're not going to have any influence at all. You're just going to have the money. For a lot of those people, that's a very difficult trade because they want the influence. They're there because of the influence. So they're being told you can't do anything. And what it looks like is Daniel, because in chapter 1, what happens to all of the noble men and priestly people who were of good rapport in Jerusalem? They're all taken, right? What they're doing is they're making sure that those people who have influence are not able to have influence in their homeland and cause up another uprising. In fact, we're going to take you into Babylon, we're going to make you Babylonian, and you're either going to work with us and help us, or we're just going to make sure that you're paid and taken care of for the rest of your life and not causing no problems. We're going to mollify you into non-existence. Eat, drink, and be merry, but accomplish nothing. And so Daniel's not included in the inner crowd. He finds out days later that because of what these guys couldn't do, he's also going to take on the justice, or he's going to pay for that just like they would. What Daniel does here is kind of crazy. So he takes his friends, they go and pray. God gives them the wisdom and the interpretation, not just the interpretation, gives them the dream and the interpretation. His first instruction to the guy who comes and tells them that he's going to die is, don't kill the Chaldeans yet. I want you to think about, go back to Jonah. We just talked about the parallels in Jonah. What's the difference between Daniel and Jonah? What did Jonah do after they repented? Complained, yeah. What did I kind of described the picture of him going outside of the town.
He sat and watched.
Sat and watched because he wanted to see it burn. He wanted to capture that as the meteor comes in from outer space, decimates the town, and blows all of those horrible sinners into smithereens. He wanted to see justice. Daniel, when he knows that he has the answer, the first thing that he does is say, hold on, wait, don't kill those guys who probably hate him. They've certainly kept him out of any sphere of influence. His mind turns towards mercy, towards the people who stand against him and his God. Whew. I don't think I could do it. I know I'm not a Daniel, because I know that if I had people who hated me that much, who were against my God that much, to sit and watch them take the things out of the sacred spaces and put them in their sacred spaces underneath their God, and then to be dishonoring towards my God in that way, I would want to see them die. I mean, I can't think of why I wouldn't. They're the enemy to my God. Daniel's instinct is grace. He saves their lives. Had he gone in and been like, Nebuchadnezzar, you can kill all of those guys after I tell you this. In fact, after I tell you, will you commit to killing all of them? He probably could have done that. He had that much power in that moment. And the king probably thought he was full of it to make that kind of claim. So he interprets it, saves all of those guys, and all of a sudden, what once was encapsulated in a space that belonged to another god fills the space and overtakes it. I'll give you an example of how this happens. So Mrs. Knudsen and I bought a car one time. It's a Honda Pilot. It's a really cool car. And it was an impulse buy, to be honest. We wanted a better looking car. Our trash heap of a 2000 Avalon was falling apart. It had what would have been like 500,000 kilometers on there. All of the seats were torn, and we see this car and we're like, oh, it's really cool. So we buy it, and right away, like, was it 2 days afterwards, I get a call from Mrs. Knudsen. She's like, Jason, the brakes aren't working. Like, I'm pressing down, but it's not stopping. I'm like, oh. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, she forgot how to use the brakes. Sorry, Tiffany. I told her to take it to a brake shop and get it checked out. Almost instantly, they found that the previous owner of the car had put oil in the brake line. Now, does anyone know what happens to oil in a brake line? What's going to happen? Anybody have an idea? Yeah.
They just jam it.
No. It's yeah.
Is it like grease it so it's faster?
No.
Like
So it's going to corrode all of the materials in there that are rubber. So it's going to essentially take apart every little piece. In fact, it's so corrosive you can flush the whole system multiple times with great brake fluid, perfect brake fluid, amazing brake fluid. And it's still going to be there corroding those parts. This is what happens. This is exactly what happens when Babylon brings in these symbolic representations of God and these men of God. It's so corrosive in the culture because they are not going to change. The God that they represent is not going to change. They've done this before. They've brought other gods in. They've brought other people in who have bent the knee. They're going to show it in the next chapter. They're not going to bend the knee, and they are not going to change. You can try and flush them out as much as you can. The damage has already been done. What does this say about us? You could go in two different directions. So, what is an effect, a negative effect of something? You can ask your neighbor, what's a negative effect of something coming into our lives that has this kind of corrosive effect on us? I mean, there's an obvious answer here. I hear some people saying friends. Yeah, that's true. If you bring sin in your life without God removing that for you, it's going to destroy everything. Like it will eventually cause every single part to fail. It won't happen right away, but eventually you're going to be driving down the freeway. You're going to go to try and step on the brakes, and the car's just going to go straight into the next car in front of you once traffic piles up. And that is what happens. Now, can you be like that? Can you have that kind of effect in a positive way? Can you be that type of is it a caustic agent? Is that what you call it for those of you biochemical people? How can you be that kind of, have that kind of effect in a positive way? If your friends can be that for you in a negative way, can you be like that towards your friends? Is that hard? It makes an impact, though. Your friends are going to probably be uncomfortable as you act in that kind of way in their life. And they might reject you. But God's word does not return void. Which means that even if they reject you, it says in the Bible, the stone that the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone. Not because you are able to put that cornerstone in their life. It's because once God moves in, he doesn't want to leave. He will fill the space. That's what he does in all of us. That's why it's so hard once we become Christians to manage sin in our life. Like we feel that guilt that comes on us from having sin, that conviction that comes on us, because God is a jealous God for the space that's in our hearts and in our minds. He wants to fill the space, and he will do so, and it becomes uncomfortable to the point where that sin has to die. In the same way that we're seeing this story play out. Is that making sense? Okay.
Can I just add
yeah.
out there? I think too, it's just real important. I mean, I'm not going to tell my whole story, but I think when you go against the flow of thinking, when you want to be changed in an environment as a single individual, I think one of the things I learned over all these years is that you have to rely on the Spirit of God. You can't just rely on yourself.
Amen.
You can't just rely on your ideas of what things should look like, but you really have to be seeking the Lord. I mean, your time on your knees has to equal your time engaging with people, at least equal it, if not more so. And so, my encouragement to you guys is just as you think about that and as you want to move forward in this way, just know that it's the Spirit of the Lord working through you, because in your flesh, there's nothing really valuable for change.
And that's exactly what Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar. Because Nebuchadnezzar approaches him and he's like, wow, you're amazing. And right away Daniel's like, it's not, those guys were right. There isn't anyone on earth who can tell you your dream. That's kind of a silly thing to request, King. However, I know a God who can. And here, let me tell you about what this means. It means that eventually, in fact, fairly quickly, your kingdom's going to come apart quite brutally. And it does. And we see that in the book of Daniel when the Persians invade Babylon in the middle of the night. It's a really interesting part of the story. But we're not there yet. We'll get there by 2028, I promise. If you've been in Acts at PIC for a year, we'll get there, I promise. I've got one more section of chapter 2. We're going to look at the actual prophecies that Daniel makes. I want to point out one more thing and then we'll be done. We'll pray. And I realized we forgot to pray to open us up, and we should have, and I apologize. Daniel and Jonah carry a lot of the same problems, but they go about solving those problems in completely different ways. They're both outside of their home culture. They're both asked to do something that goes against norms. They're both seeing God act in the world in a way that's favorable to enemies of Jerusalem, to enemies of their people. God is reaching out a hand, extending grace towards large groups of people who have been antithetical and really quite brutal. If you look at what Nebuchadnezzar did, I can't remember which one of the kings was it that he plucked the eyes out. He murdered his kids, and then plucked his eyes out right after he murders his kids, and kept him alive so that the last thing that he saw was his kids being murdered. Like, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a friend of the Jewish people. And so what happens here is quite miraculous. But that's what God does. Like, some of you have friends who you're like, oh, they'll never become a Christian. Why would I ever invite them to some church thing? They're just gonna, yeah. Daniel convinces the guy who's gouging people's eyes out and killing their kids that his God is a good God and one worth worshiping. So if Nebuchadnezzar can get there, your friends can get there, trust me. And you might be thinking, well, they're keyboard warriors online for causes that I really don't believe in. Yeah, they can get there. It's not through you. It's not because of what you do. It's because of who fills you. And when you lean on him and when you spend time growing in him, man, he does amazing things in your life. And he will cause you to want to see other people with the kind of love that he has. Daniel keeps his eyes on Christ. And that might sound odd because Jesus hasn't come yet in his time. But he knew he was coming. And Daniel, none of the things that were of earthly importance really took precedent. Now, I mean, yeah, he told him the dream so that he would live. Like, he didn't want to die. But he doesn't get all worked up about it. And we'll end on this. There are a lot of things that stress us out in life. There are a lot of little things that can really frustrate us, or they seem like really, really big things. And they might be big things, you know. But your perspective has to stay on who Jesus is and what he's asked you to do. And sometimes that means he gives us great gifts. Sometimes that means that things are taken away from us. I'll tell one last story. I've got one more minute. And then we'll end and I'll pray. I might go a couple minutes, 2 minutes over. Try not to. This last week, or a month ago, we found out that a friend of ours had pancreatic cancer. And they found out because she was having really terrible stomach issues. And pancreatic cancer it's like a 97 or 98% death rate. Like, no one really survives it. And she was having stomach issues. They go in, they do a scan, they see the cancer on her pancreas, and let her know, like, hey, you've got pancreatic cancer, which is essentially like a year. Like, that's what Mr. Steinkamp had that took him out, and it was about 10 months, I think. It was pancreatic cancer, right? And that was he had a good amount of time after for that finding. It turns out that the stomach issue wasn't caused by the cancer, it was something else. And it was so early on, I just found this out 2 days ago, it was so early on, it's stage 1 pancreatic cancer that they went in and did surgery to see if it had spread anywhere else. It was only in her pancreas. They're going to be able to go in and remove it and take it out, and she's going to be 100% healthy, it's a total miracle. And I was telling my daughter this yesterday. This person is a special person in our family's life back in the States, and she goes, so a stomach ache that took her to the hospital saved her life? It's like, that's a great way to say it, Ella. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the pain of the moment that we curse God for the stomach ache and we thank him for finding the cancer and getting rid of it. And maybe there's something in your life right now that seems really painful, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have a purpose. You don't know what that is. You can praise God for that too. You don't know what he's going to do with that. All right, we'll end there. God, I just thank you so much for this time. I thank you for us being able to come back together. God, I ask that if there was any wisdom from you in this time, Lord, that would be what sticks with us. Anything of me that was said foolishly, like redrafting the Bible into Gen Z lingo, Lord, I just ask for your forgiveness for that. I ask that you go with us this week and help us to keep our eyes on you, God. Help us to set our attention on you. Help us to be that kind of friend to our friends that draws people in. Help us to grow in our relationship with you in your name. Amen. All right, we're going to do walk over to Astaka. If you want to join us, we'll leave in like 3 minutes, or you can just leave if you've got your buddy. And we'll see you next week. Grab some cookies, grab a drink. You can, if you're thrifty and you don't want to pay for a drink at the stalls, you could fill a drink here, carry it over. I was in college once.
I'm almost ready.
Uncle Jason, do you remember in the Bible? I think it's definitely one of the kings where God just like he's